Hello, 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 and welcome to all you PIMOs, PIMIs, POMOs, POMIs, and PIMQs. Welcome to The World, the podcast where we discuss all things related to the process of waking up, walking out, and moving on from life as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm Dr. Ryan Lee, a former JW with a doctorate in clinical psychology and a practicing therapist specializing in helping former JWs and other former cult members move through the recovery and rebuilding process. All right, so today we're going to talk about what to do when your spouse and children are physically and mentally in. You know, nothing makes me happier than when I hear that someone has woken up and their partners and children have woken up with them. It can be such an overwhelming journey, and it's such a gift to be able to make that journey with those you're closest to. Sadly, this is usually more the exception than the rule. It's far more common that one partner wakes up, and in addition to all the work that goes into cutting ties with the organization, there's perhaps even the bigger task of figuring out how this rebirth is going to affect the family dynamic of your spouse and children. And of course, we want to do everything we can to retain our most meaningful relationships in this new paradigm. There are so many variables at play in this scenario, and there's no surefire way for reaching the outcome you desire. But today we're going to do our best to explore these variables and offer some guidance and things to consider as you navigate this transition. I'm sure, as usual, we'll be taking plenty of detours, but the main areas we're going to be addressing are breaking the news to your spouse about you waking up and wanting to leave the organization. This will be the primary focus for part 1 of this episode. In part 2, we'll discuss deciding whether or not to stay together and what that might look like in either case, and how to parent the kids in this new paradigm. Now, before we discuss how to break the news of you leaving the organization to your spouse, let's just take a second to be absolutely sure that this is what you want to do. Now, of course, I am absolutely in favor of you taking the steps to free yourself from this cult as soon as possible. But that's my opinion, and I don't have to live your life. And it's important to enter into this with our eyes wide open, knowing that choosing to come out of the closet and leave the organization is an unavoidably disruptive journey that will create quite a bit of turbulence. And again, this is so worth doing. I'm not trying to talk you out of it. And the destructive aspect is an essential first step in order to begin the creative rebuilding process. But it's not a process you want to start unless you're completely sure of your decision. This is a bell that will be really hard to unring. I'm not saying that you need to have everything sorted out regarding your beliefs or your plans for the future. What I am saying is that you need to be honest with yourself. Knowing what you know now, can you continue being a witness and living your life within their program? There are plenty of people who decide that they can. They may decide that continuing to attend meetings and keeping up appearances is worth the price of retaining the connection with family, community, and the predictable comforts of life. I'm sure there's no way to get stats on this, but my intuition tells me I bet like a third, at least, of the people that are in the organization are remaining there under those pretenses. That said, I assume that for most of you listening, this simply isn't an option. And being 100% clear on this point will create a foundation for all of the difficult decisions you're going to have to make moving forward. There's this idea I like that I got from one of the Scientology clients I was working with. And let's be clear, Scientology is just one of the most destructive mainstream cults out there. But, you know, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And they had this idea that I liked, which is, you know, when you find yourself swimming in a sea of chaos and confusion, find the one thing that you know to be true and let that serve as your anchor. And for you, as you enter into what will almost undoubtedly be a lot of confusion and challenge and difficulty, let this be your anchor, that no matter how everything else plays out, we know in our heart that we cannot continue living a lie, that continuing with this organization is simply not an option. We may not have the rest of it figured out, but we know that much and we can proceed from there. Okay, so now that we're clear that remaining in the organization is not an option, let's talk about how to break the news to your spouse. I'm going to separate this section into talking about whether you're dealing with a spouse that is PIMQ or, physically in, mentally questioning, or physically in, mentally in. So if you have a partner that is PIMQ, this can be a hopeful scenario, but it's still important to proceed very carefully. Our goal shouldn't be to wake our partners up or get them to agree with our perspective, but rather to invite a safe space for them to join us in our own questioning. Don't come up with a 10-page PowerPoint, crafting perfect arguments aimed at destroying their defenses. This will almost surely backfire, because as I've mentioned before in other episodes, it's human nature to cling tighter to our beliefs when approached by someone who's trying to take them away from us forcefully. Instead, begin by just simply sharing with them that you have some doubts. Let them know that because you love them, you feel you owe it to them to be honest about your experience, but also that you want to respect their beliefs. And then get consent before moving forward. Just as simple as, would it be okay if I share my thoughts on this? Now, unless you authentically want to debate your ideas, in some cases maybe to get more clarity, maybe figure out how you both feel about the religion together. If that's not the case, then it's best to be clear that your intentions for sharing this is not to argue, and that you're not open to changing your mind. But rather, this is about being fully honest about how you feel, so that they're in the best position to decide for themselves about how things will move forward. Now, in most cases, this is going to be a lot for them to take in. This is a big change that's going to have a lot of implications. So if they give you anything other than a hard rejection to what you're sharing, this is a win, okay? What I mean is, if they say, well, this is a lot to digest, or I'm not really sure how to feel about this, or even better, if they say, you've made some interesting points. These are excellent signs. It means something you've said has moved them and planted a seed. And they may be starting to question, or at the very least, they're needing to reconcile their beliefs with their love for you. If it plays out this way, do not use this as an opportunity to double down or push for more or see how far you could get them to agree with you. Instead, just tell them that you appreciate them giving you this space. Empathize with how difficult it must be to hear this news and how it's a lot to take in. And then let them know to take all the time they need to process, and that you are here whenever they're ready to explore further. While there are no guarantees with this approach, in my opinion, is the best way to improve the odds that they might come around. Just a soft, gentle approach that gives them full autonomy and agency to come to their own conclusions and work through their own feelings about it without feeling pressured. On the other hand, if your spouse is a hardcore PIMI, we may want to take a slightly different approach. If you have a sense that they're firmly planted in their beliefs and will choose the organization above all else, it's probably best to keep your thoughts, feelings, and intentions completely to yourself until you're ready to make a move. Otherwise, you'll most likely only be creating additional resistance that will make everything unnecessarily harder. So in this context, the ripping off the Band-Aid approach is probably best. When you're ready, sit down with your spouse and tell them that you need to talk. Tell them that you've come to some decisions about your relationship and the organization that you need to share with them. Again, make it clear that what you're about to share is not open to debate, and the purpose of sharing is simply to inform them so that you can both decide how to move forward. Let them know that you've decided to leave in basic, simple terms. I highly recommend not going into detailed explanations as to why you're leaving, your reasons, unless you feel safe that your thoughts will be received with loving compassion. Most likely that won't be the case, and you going into a lot of detail about all your reasons will just create more arguments that will kind of distract from what the purpose is of this conversation. If they start pushing for that, and again, if it doesn't feel safe, you might want to just say, I'd be open to sharing more a little bit later if you're curious to hear, but for now, this conversation is just about letting you know that I'm leaving and talking about how we're going to move forward from here. And again, thank them for listening. Empathize with how hard this must be for them to hear. This is a bombshell, You're going through your own process, but especially if, they hadn't seen this coming, this is going to be a lot for them to digest. And then depending on how things go, you can just ask them, would you like to talk more right now about how we're going to move forward, or do you need more time to process? And if they seem like they need more time, give it to them. Give them space. That will ensure that this conversation goes better when they're not feeling blindsided and they've had some time to gather their thoughts. All right, so that wraps up part 1 of this episode. And tune in on Monday when we'll talk a little bit more about the question of whether to stay in the relationship or not, and what that might look like either way, and also how to co-parent within this new dynamic. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please just take one little itty-bitty second and hit the subscribe button. 2 more seconds maybe to leave a review. And pay it forward by sharing this podcast with other people who may benefit. If you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for future topics, email me at drryanlee@drryanlee.com or visit my website at drryanlee.com. Until next time, remember, you are brave. You're strong. You can do this. And you, my friend, are not alone.